What's going on, everyone? So, Dan Hurley isn't officially the Lakers head coach yet. Now, the Lakers and Dan had their meeting, they had their talks, they had their conversation. He went back home, and now he's kind of mulling over what does he want to do? Does he want to take the job? Does he want to stay in UConn and try to make history? Right now, it looks like it's a 50-50, right? Obviously, that can change. I think we'll have our answer sooner rather than later. I think by like Monday or Tuesday, we'll probably know if he's coming on or if he's not. But there's a lot of talk of like, hey, JJ Redick is still the leading candidate, right? That it's basically Dan's job to lose, right? If he wants it, it's his. If he doesn't, it's going to JJ. JJ is next in line. But let's go under the assumption that Dan does take the job, right? What does this mean for JJ Redick? Now, personally, I actually really like the idea of bringing JJ on as the assistant, right? For a couple reasons. One is I think then now you get to properly grow, develop JJ. You get to put him in position to like now learn, right? The whole idea of bringing Dan in is to create and establish a new culture for the modern CBA and the modern NBA. Right? Because of the new CBA, it makes things so difficult. You got to constantly cycle through new players, right? You have to have this influx of talent, just like you do in college. Right? In college, every year you're having a roster turnover, right? Yeah, you have a couple guys that stick around, but for the most part, you're cycling in all new players. Because of the new CBA, that's probably what's going to have to happen. That doesn't necessarily mean that that has to happen between your 1 through 5, but like your 6 through 15 or guys that are constantly going to be recycled, constantly going to be replaced. It's why the Lakers want to get a guy like Dan that is so good at developing guys, that you can get this young influx of talent and undrafted guys and second round picks and late first round picks and all that stuff, and really properly grow and develop them to be the next wave of, okay, these guys fade out, boom, we got these guys in, right? And you can continue to compete and be one of the top teams in the league for the foreseeable future, to where even some of these teams like the Thunder, they're going to have to start paying guys at some point, right? They're going to have to start cycling through things. And the idea is that Dan's philosophy can come in and his program can really kind of shape and basically be a culture shock to the Lakers, right? That it can completely change and reshape how the Lakers approach the NBA going forward. That doesn't mean they're not going to go after a Trey or a Donovan. It doesn't mean that they're not going to go after stars. The Lakers are still going to be the Lakers. They're still going to do Laker things. But again, it's more so the back end of the guys that are coming in that are being your 6th through 8th guy, right? Can you properly grow and develop those guys? And then when you have that new influx. So bringing in a guy like JJ, I think as your lead assistant, I do think makes a lot of sense. Now, obviously, it has to be something that Dan wants to do, right? Because Dan, I believe the Lakers are going to let him have full control. I believe the Lakers are going to let him pick his own coaching staff. I think they're going to let him basically, hey, here's the keys. Good luck, right? So can the Lakers kind of nudge or entice Dan to like, hey, bring in JJ. We really like JJ. We think that his philosophy is kind of aligned with yours. Because regardless, however you feel about JJ, he does have the basketball mind. And I do think he could have a lot of success as a head coach in a good capacity, right? But also I think as an assistant, he can start growing and getting that experience, getting that growth. And then also you have two kind of safety nets. One, you have JJ kind of coming up the ranks with Dan. And let's say Dan does want to go back to the NCAA, or, let's say he implements his culture, right? Like, let's say he does sign an 8-year deal, right? And then Dan, ends up going like, hey, you know what? I did all I could do here. Maybe we won a couple championships, right? Like things are good. I want to go explore somewhere else. Or maybe another team comes in and offers him a bunch of money when his contract's up. Or, maybe he wants to go back to college, something. Well, now you got JJ that can step in and kind of keep it going. And got to remember, Dan is like 20 years older than JJ. So it's like, like JJ could be the next step post Dan, but he's also a guy that's coming in and learning under the philosophy, that has that understanding. Now he's been, an assistant for 8 years, and he's ready to take that step into Dan, as Dan sails off sunset, maybe he retires, whatever he does, right? The other thing is, too, is it kind of gives you the Frank Vogel, Jason Kidd route, where if, let's say Dan doesn't work, right? Say you give it 3 years, and it's not what we thought it would be. Dan he isn't translating to the NBA level, which happens a lot with college coaches, right? It's not really working that route. It's not going good. Like the program isn't really working, right? Well, now you can let him go, and now you got your candidate in JJ Redick who can step up and now jump into that spot, right? Where, it's the same thing with Frank Vogel and Jason Kidd, where they really wanted Jason Kidd, but with all the off-court stuff that happened at the time, they were a little hesitant. So they were like, hey, let's make Kidd an assistant. Let's bring in Frank Vogel as the head coach. If Frank Vogel flops, well, then Jason Kidd, boom, now he's the head coach of the Lakers, right? And then Frank Vogel ended up winning an NBA championship, and then Jason Kidd ends up leaving. I know people are like, see it all the time still. We're like, we should have never let Jason Kidd go. Like, we weren't, like, Frank Vogel being fired wasn't even a thought at the time when Jason Kidd left. So can't really be too mad in that regard there. But again, it kind of gives you more of that safety net. It gives you a little more insurance, right? And then also, again, Jason Kidd kind of gets to go up the ranks. But I also think just from a basketball standpoint, right? He's a guy that does have an offensive mind. He's a guy that is well respected by players and LeBron, stuff like that. I think he could be much like Jason Kidd was on that staff, where he's the guy that can kind of be the relator to LeBron and some of the others. He can kind of be the guy that can call out and hold guys accountable. And because I don't worry about Dan being that, because he's very loud. He's a yeller, right? Like, Dan likes to get into it. I mean, there's even a video going, like a viral video going around of him, like, close in my huddle. Like, I love that stuff. I definitely think he'll be on these guys' helmets. But JJ is also a guy that has a relationship with all of these guys, has like a relationship to where he can relate things, to where if there is maybe a little frustration, or maybe there is this like kind of like, hey, I don't like JJ can be the guy that goes, hey, like, no, kind of be the middleman, right? I also think he gives another offensive perspective where, you, like, one of the beauties of Dan is he is such a tactician, particularly on the offensive side, and is really good at coming up with different offensive schemes. Like, he's really good at, like, better than anyone you've really seen. Like, because he's just so unique at how he draws up designs. Also, a lot of ball movement, right? He likes to move the ball a lot of off-ball movement, right? The guys aren't staying stagnant. There's a lot of free-flowing actions, right? So I really do think, like, it's very similar to like Golden State and San Antonio is probably the best comparison, right? Where guys aren't really stagnant, guys aren't really standing around. There's always constant movement. There's always, a screen that leads into a screen, leads into a back screen. Like, there's all kinds of different things, intricacies that go into the offense, right? So Dan, I believe, can come in and bring that. But JJ is also one of those guys that really views the offensive side of things in that manner. You see it on Mind the Game, where he's breaking down all these intricacies, all these different variations of offenses and how he would approach things and stuff like that. I just think it gives you another basketball mind. I think it gives you another guy that players would respect. I think it gives you a guy with NBA experience, not on the coaching standpoint, but as a former player that had a long career, right? Like, and had success and, had played in the playoffs and been on good teams. And, right, so I just think that there's a real benefit to him potentially coming on board. Now, I do think the idea of, like, bringing in a Rondo and a Phil Handy and all I don't think any of that happens. I think more likely than not what happens is Dan comes in, he rounds out his bench how he sees it, and then, my hope is that maybe the Lakers or, maybe even Dan would be interested in bringing in a JJ and going like, hey, yeah, like, I do think you'd be helpful in, the offensive side of things. I think you'd be helpful in the player side of things. I think you'd help with development, right? Because I do think he does have a lot of value in all those things. JJ can come in. He can be the assistant, right? I still, there's always the possibility that Dan ends up saying no, right? Because, again, it is 50-50. If Dan says no, then I think JJ takes the role. And, again, I've talked about it in a previous video, my more recent video before this one, so go check it out after this video if you want. Like, my concern is that, like, he's walking away from a lot, right? Literal history. If he, and he'd go down as one of the greatest coaches in NCAA history if he does this. So it's like, is he really going to be willing to walk away from all that to go be the head coach of the Lakers? I don't know, right? I'm all for it. Again, if you can get Dan, you get Dan. You have to. If you can get him, you have to get him, right? I think JJ's probably still going to be the most likely candidate, the most likely scenario, but we'll see. Time will tell. Because, again, it's Dan's job to lose, right? If he wants it, it's his. If he doesn't want it and he says no, again, I think we'll find out come Monday or Tuesday, the latest. But I like the idea of, like, give me Dan, give me JJ. and then whoever else is involved, I'm all for it. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like the idea of JJ Redick as the assistant alongside Dan? Do you think no, right? Like, stay away, let Dan pick his own roster, stay away from JJ, period. A lot of people don't want him to be the head coach, but again, as the assistant, again, he gets that experience, gets that learning, and then it kind of gives you, again, that fail-safe. To me, it's kind of more of like, get that fail-safe. You get the guy that can be the predecessor to Dan, right, in 8 years or however long the contract ends up being for Dan and the Lakers. I do think it'll be a long-term, high-salary type contract, but we'll see. However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, whether you like it, whether you don't, love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot if you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Now subscribe to the channel, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.